It's been over 4 months since I've made anything in the workshop, and almost a year since I agreed to do a video for the Melbourne Tool Company on their then new large router plane. This, however, is not that video. I've recently covered the reasons for my absence, if you're interested, but for now it's time to clean up and move on. Spring has come to Sydney, time for a fresh start. So this video is about relationships. Our relationship with our time, hobby, workshops, supporters, and of course, our families. It is also about a simple display box and what it can teach us about all of those more complex interworkings of life. Last month, we sharpened all the things, ironically, except for the blades for this router plane. And now, in the few days before we head away for a long overdue trip to China to visit the family, I've found a few workshop hours to tackle the next item on my to-do list, or to want to-do list. A display box to complete my current MTC lineup. It will be made only of the finest Bedslats that I found in the gutter, and a scrap of ply pallet wood that I stole from work, because here's the thing. When I say a few hours, it's not a figure of speech. As usual of late, the hashtag naptime woodworking principles will apply heavily here, and it is another opportunity to keep things simple. Something I often struggle with. While time poor, I also want to get the most personally from this rare chance to indulge in my hobby, and for me that means working clean. Sweeping, dusting, and keeping the air quality in check are just part and parcel of that. While I'd have loved to have made this with all hand tools and some complex joinery to show off the MTC range, in reality all I have time for is power tools, butt joints, and screws. Not a rebate or even a pocket hole to be seen. And you know what? I'm okay with that. This is, after all, workshop furniture. The other displays were made with a similar design and they still look great. I think as woodworkers we often get caught up in this trap of constant overcomplication, thinking that every build we should be striving for perfection. I've come to realize that perfection is often the enemy of productivity, and sometimes even of enjoyment when our skill fails to meet our expectations. So for this box, I will attempt to keep it simple and keep it moving along. Hell, we're even foregoing the glue. Quick taparoo with Jimmy the Fake Maker's thwacker. A check square with Dana's corner jig. Pilot holes, countersink and screws. It doesn't get much simpler than that. And the Bedslat pine looks just fine. There is something to be said about the beauty that can be achieved through minimalism. And though I am definitely not versed in the subject, in this particular case, though perhaps not by choice, we will try to embrace that philosophy and keep less as more. You can do an awful lot with a miter saw and a drill. There must be a dozen ways to fit a rear panel, which today shall be the 9mm high quality fresh packing ply off a discarded crate. But hell, I'm not even going to waste time measuring it, let alone cutting a groove or a rebate. No, at this stage my willpower was strong, and using the actual box to set the table saw fence for the first dimension was all I needed. Already by this stage of the build, I was feeling more relaxed. You see, while yes, the time demands of looking after my baby girl can account for less shop time, the truth is, I just really haven't felt like it. I'm sure the P&D robbed me of a lot of my mojo of the things that I used to love. When I've had time lately, I've chosen to spend it in the garden, doing the spring lawn reno, and designing D&D tools for my Etsy shop. And you know what? I'm okay with that. But I do really want to reconnect with my workshop and find the joy that I know is there again. I also want to thank my supporters with a special shout out to the chappos, Jack and Nige, who helped spark my recent interest in lawn care, to my channel members and sponsors who have been very understanding through this recent difficult period of my life. Hell, MTC said from day one to take my time with the video for them, but now it's nearly a year on and I think I'm taking the piss a little, so it's time to get that router plane review up soon-ish. Ah well, they're getting some love in this one too, I suppose. I am very grateful for the relaxed relationship I have with those who help out me and the channel, and to those who take time out of their day to watch my content. Cheers all. Back with the display boxes back, and like the frame, it is as simple as it comes. Sorry presto, just screws today, no taka-taka. Ah, look at that. Some of the slats must have had a slight twist. That's okay, I've got the perfect solution. I'm going to ignore it. Time is short, it's just a box, and it will spend its life sitting on a shelf. I can live with a slight twist. Then, just to couple an error outside of my control with one that I could have foreseen, I drilled the pilot holes on the wrong side of the joint, but got lucky the first time and missed the screw. But wait for it. There we go. I just realised what I did. Solution? Move on and replace the offending screw with a slightly shorter one. Don't get me wrong, there is a time and a place for seeking perfection. But I think it's even more important to realise when the jar of fucks is empty and you got no more to give. And that usually, you can be okay with that. Right, let's bring in the hand tools and the catchphrase and start to jam for all the things. I'm still on my efficiency kick, and honestly using the block plane here is much faster than setting up the palm router. Also, it's approximately 7:30 AM on day 2 of the build and Bubba is still asleep, as I find this time it gives me the opportunity to leave a lot of the guilt of taking workshop time for myself and place it in the cot upstairs. But that also means no more power tools, and I have a few little things that I need to do before I can call this box done. What a shame, I will have to break out some of the MTC after all. Wifey has been kind enough to let me come and play in the workshop, so best I not fire up a dust extractor or a power sander to wake the baby. Still sticking with the minimalist theme here, I am tracing out a scrapwood peg that I want to hang the router plane off. While I very much suck at using hand tools, check out Luke at the Aussie Woodshed if this is your thing and you want some actually good hand tool advice, I do enjoy them. And shaping small bits of things like this peg, I have done for all of my MTC display boxes. I might have given up on using the router plane to actually route out some grooves for the joinery on this box, but damn it, I'm not going to let all of last month's sharpening go to waste. While I never designed this workbench with hand tool usage in mind, I'm mostly a power tool woodworker, it does the job okay for being fairly light and being on wheels. It compensates for weight with clamping options. I probably should have cut away more of the waste, but I just love this little block plane and the sound it makes with a fresh blade makes me feel good on the inside. So I was happy to invest a little extra precious me time to do that. I eventually even remembered to add a waste block to stop the blowout on the backside of the stroke. I moved to a single dog for the final finesse, fitting the block into and out of the router plane to test, tweaking, repeating. But before anyone comments, I'm comfortable with my fingers here, and they're not as close to the blade as the camera makes them look. However, while I have a very healthy relationship and respect for moving blades, here's a pro tip for stationary ones. Take the bloody thing out of the router plane while doing your test fits. Ask me how I know if it's still sharp out of the box. I mean, are you even a woodworker if you haven't used CA glue and activator to stem the bleed from the least dangerous task that you've done that day so you can get straight back to work? That's a nice fit. Speaking of relationships to tools, learn to give your tapes and rulers time away from your hands. Relative measurements and positions are faster, less error prone, and usually easier. They can be as simple as a few equal thickness scraps of wood to center the new peg on the display. Giving Stabby McStabface here a chance to chime in and mark out my drill holes. You might have noticed, as usual, there are several unashamed shoutouts for makers who created a number of the tools that I like to use in my shop, including Dazza from 2x4, good friend of mine who crafted me this marking knife. I make a point of doing this each video, as not only is it great to share the love of the community with others who might want to buy local handmade quality tools or discover other cool maker channels, but sometimes you recommend a little Danish woodworker with 135 subscribers and become good friends. Next thing you know, JesperMakes is regularly wearing your shirt in videos that are getting a few million views. What goes around comes around. Be kind and support your fellow woodworkers, creators and suppliers. I've loved MTC since day one. I've bought them, used them, and now I have a free hat, which my wife constantly steals. Winning life. Right, well, it looks like the fence for the plane will just sit happily in the corner, which only leaves the locking hex key to find a home. A simple little block with a trench in it should do the trick. Trench. Looks like the router plane will get a go in this video after all. Well, it's still early enough, and in for a fun penny, in for a spoke shave pound. I grabbed a scrap of pine and put a very rough, rounded taper on it, because I think the MTC spoke shaves are just as, if not more fun to use than the block plane. And I've just sharpened them, so hey, let's use them. By sheer coinkydink, the hex key is just over 3mm or 1/8 of an inch thick, and the smallest blade that MTC sent me is the perfect size to hog out the trench after grabbing the Dozuki and cutting in the sides. Now straight up, this is the first time I have used a router plane. I've not sharpened the blade out of the box, and I'm hitting very soft pine on its open end grain. So please do not take this quick play as a meaningful indication of the capabilities of this tool. We won't be getting any clean shavings here. Having said that, setting up was very intuitive, it's very easy to adjust, and it got the job done. I might actually bother to read the manual before I do my proper video on it. So far, the hardest part has been finding a good camera angle. Also, keep in mind that whenever people are doing these unboxing and tool reviews, particularly on cheaper tools, and they have freshly sharpened things up, that you can get crapoleum sharp if you rub it on a stone for long enough to make a couple of shavings for a YouTube video. The real test of the steel is how well it holds that edge and how well you can resharpen it afterwards. I too, of course, am guilty of oversimplification for the purposes of my YouTube videos, but be a little bit cynical on the things that you see. If you see a cheaper blade, it's probably, yes, going to be sharp that once, and then you'll be resharpening it every 30 seconds. I have had MTC blades for over a year now, and I can tell you that the steel in them is pretty fantastic, especially compared to my super cheap big box store chisels. I used the masking tape trick to transfer those holes from that little holding jig I made to the display box, and finished it off all with a coat of the same Liberon wax that I used on the other two displays, so they'd match nicely. I do enjoy using this high-end French polish grade furniture wax on my scrap wood junk workshop furniture builds. It adds a lovely sense of irony and yellows up the wood quite nicely, makes it feel a bit warmer. If you are listening carefully in the background here, you'll hear my final shout out for the day, the #1 Crude Mistakes podcast featuring a Nord, a Swede and a Lincolnshire a Glenn. It's got a Glenn. If you're looking to fill that clamp-shaped hole in your weekly Maker podcast schedule after they called it quits this month, KJ, Glenn and Havard are worthy fillers of your time. Link below. Speaking of farewells, I also want to say a quick thanks and goodbye to Mario the Woodfather, who also pulled up stumps on his YouTube career this week. As for me, well, am I happy with my simple wooden box? Yes. Yes, I am. But of course, it's not a box, is it? It's a step towards refinding the joy of woodwork and reconnecting with my workshop, filming videos and making sawdust. Daddy duties will continue to take priority, and it may be a while until I can start returning to the pace and time of projects that I used to do. But you know what? I'm okay with that.